A spiritual presence menaces an idyllic Californian suburb in Steven Spielberg's 1982 classic Poltergeist, both literally and metaphorically upending the lives of the Freeling family. The poltergeist is a folkloric spirit, a troubled and troubling agent responsible for physical disturbances in the world. We utilize Spielberg's poltergeist as a scaffold within this text, deployed within the broader context of our ongoing research practice, ecological Gaia theory. This is a means through which we consider an intersection, a muddying and an overlap between the physical and spiritual realms, wherein we seek to consider human, ecological, and psychic troubling of the natural by extraction and extractive industries. The benefit of reading any fiction as petrofiction, according to Bergthaler, is that literary texts and other cultural artifacts can be about oil, even when, and perhaps especially, when they don't explicitly address the subject. This provides us with an opportunity to apprehend Poltergeist and extend readings of this film as a commentary on consumerist culture and think to what lies at the core of that which is consumed, the power and presence of oil. Through Poltergeist, considerations of agency, the stick and the use, the catastrophe of spills, we enter into petroculture, seeking to chase the spirit of the black liquid gold as it is contained within things, moves through them, and moves through us. This spirit of oil, a Geist in the Hegelian sense. Hegel's Geist is notoriously slippery and shifty, spectral. And indeed, to trace the word to its etymological roots is to confer with a ghost, as in Caspar, the Bell Witch, or the Ghost of Christmas Past. As the term gathers Christian connotations, however, it becomes synonymous with the spirit or breath, the force which powers and propels. The Geist becomes a multiplicity, but we can apprehend one further iteration, that of the Weltgeist, a world soul, becoming in and of the world in collectivity, but also that which animates it. We position Hegel's Geist as a vessel through which we can apprehend agentic non-human matter, as a spirit moving through and with the world. Within this petrocultural frame, Hegel's Geist becomes instead our Petrogeist, a fluid and ubiquitous manifestation of spirit and matter at the core of our petromodernity, ensconced within the eruptions and disruptions of climate change and collapse. We see this everyday haunting as a symptom of Anthropocene living, an ocean of oil having powered the world till now and on into our disastrous ecological reality. As Morton writes, ecological reality is suffused with a ghostly, quivering energy. It pertains to phenomena we call paranormal, which is easiest to comprehend as action at a distance, non-mechanical causality, telepathy, telekinesis, non-living things moving by themselves. Life is a subset of vast quivering. Movement itself is a subject of a deeper shimmying. To think the human without recourse to reactionary essentialism, to embrace other life forms and other humans in solidarity, would need to allow for the possibility that tables can dance.
The tables dance, the chairs slide across the floor. Objects and people are moved by forces present but unseen in Poltergeist. And through this, we see a cinematic expansion of the spiritual and ghostly as an expression of the force held and exerted by objects and the agentic mattering of the non-human. In our spectral tracings of the Geist through petrocultural frames, we are entering into W.J.T. Mitchell's medium theory, one which, in the new materialist tradition, ascribes agency to non-human and non-living matter, finding media in every facet of being. The media which Bart Welling traces within this framing, across artistic and consumer objects, is imbued with oil and its manufacture, use, and transport. The medium here is substance, whether in terms of the exchange value of oil, the barrel of oil as X, or in artworks and texts which constitute or interrogate, clarify, and petrofictions. As Le Ménager states, oil itself is a medium that fundamentally supports all modern media forms concerned with what counts as culture, from film to recorded music, novels, magazines, photographs, sports, and the wikis, blogs, and videography of the internet. It is held within almost all we cast our eyes over, powering its movement around the globe through supply chains. We consider it as the Derridean spectre, a present absence, being neither and both at the same time, of which one doesn't know whether it's living or dead. Thus, it's always both revenant, invoking what was, and arrivant, announcing what will come, and always associated with the eternal return of singularity, with the repetition of first time and last time. We extend this attention to media and matter, however, looking to extensions of the medium beyond this frame, the ghostly hand emerging from the screen to touch Carol Ann in the opening scenes of Poltergeist, before it passes into the walls of the Freeling home. And here, in recognizing the agentic nature of matter, seek to divine its presence. We align ourselves with the eerie clairvoyant of Poltergeist, communing and reckoning with the spectral other in order to comprehend the tumult and turbulence of the world which envelops us. We assume the role of the medium, seeking out flows, spills, and undercurrents, communing with the medium itself, recognizing lively non-human presence in the reanimation of fossil fuels. Before entering the shale and the sands, we look to the spread and proliferation of oil. Rewatching Poltergeist over the last few weeks, we have been concurrently receiving news updates from Russia, where the Norilsk oil spill continues to unfold, and Assam in India, where a massive fire broke out following the slow leak of gas from a well over a 2-week period. It becomes difficult to pass out discomfort arising from the plight of the Freelings and that blooming with the oil either in smoke or in water. This is something that we have seen before. The endless repetition association with the Derridean spectre. The blooms and plumes we see on screen reactivate dormant memories, images of Deepwater Horizon, that which haunts all other spills. Deepwater Horizon is significant not just for its scale, but its timing and timeliness. In 2010, the spill flooded onto our screens as footage was beamed across the globe of the rig ablaze. The dark cloud spreads over the Gulf of Mexico. Beaches and sea life covered in this thick black sludge, but only to be repurposed, remade and rebroadcast again. It becomes a Hollywood blockbuster and a discomfortingly fast turnaround.
The notion of reading the strata is commonplace now, be it for the purposes of seeking historical data, narratives of past atmospheric conditions and the conditions of life on Earth, or be it in a figurative and philosophical way, such as through the embrace of the Deleuzian stratigraphy, or in search of the human presence that gives rise to the indictable Anthropocene. In acknowledgement of the human as geologic force, the Anthropocene speaks of time out of joint, time muddied and displaced by our extractivist interventions into the record. But we recognize the strata as a space necessarily haunted by our predecessors. Indeed, Esther Perrine argues that it is not merely time that spectralizes space and transforms space into spacing, but also space that spectralizes time by giving it body and causing it to appear. As such, the ghost of time is conjured in space, becoming both out of sync and out of place, a physical occupation of everyday sites, in a disturbance of space as much as time. This speaks to the endless multiplicities of the Anthropocene, such as those explored by Catherine Youssef. But we understand this spectre as having capacity to escape from the terrestrial fixity in a manner reflective of the petroleum that dwells within the Earth. So perhaps then we need to reframe our reading of strata. Oil, the accelerant par excellence, is extracted from deep layers of the Earth and brought to the surface, and in doing so moves between the stratigraphic lines of geology, those markers of linearity and fixity which are increasingly destabilized by Anthropocene impacts. A further muddying takes place as we begin to apply wet ontological frameworks as a way of acknowledging and exploring the fluidity and flows of petroleum, time, and the slippery and viscous place between solid and liquid. But what does it mean to read oil? Oil, in its fluidity and flows, temporal strangeness, and ability to stick to ecologic sites, can be positioned as a hypertextual medium. Oil as a text that turns on and into itself. A hypertext of oil is one that is written in recognition of the biology and physics of petroleum, these hydrocarbons which reach back across, into, and around being, collapsing past, present, and future. In this way, oil, as a hypertext scaffold, furthers the destabilization of temporal and spatial fixity, alongside the Derridean troubling of presence and absence, in order to bring notions of fluidity and flux into the shape and content of text. We think here of the rhizomatic structures presented and built within Deleuze and Guattari's Thousand Plateaus, or the labyrinths of Borges. The hypertext of oil extends too to the mixing between petroleum and history, both ecological and industrial. Oil seeps, spreads, and sticks, containing itself a narrative of life and becoming that which has enabled human history and present to take shape. Plastic, automobiles, spaceflight, power. It is everywhere, at once underlying in the ink which writes the death sentence of the Anthropocene.
It is through the negation of planetary coevalness that the mind takes form as a necropolitical void, sitting within the mountainous debris of the past, and yet within accelerating temporality of industrial extraction. While the viscosity and mutability of oil speaks to its role as hypertextual agent, a muddying force, which enmeshes itself with the other, complicating visions of a future clean of this pollutant, this muddying also occurs in a temporal space, as oil is a material which looks to the future, but which is constituted in itself by the past. We have timelines telling us that the rivers of northeast Siberia flooded by oil from the Nornickel plant will have decades of rehabilitation ahead before they might be cleansed of their contaminants. Although here we remember the cause of this spill, the thawing of permafrost leading to instability. We wonder what the future might hold as climate collapse accelerates towards catastrophe. We have speculative fiction imagining our petroleum futures as considered and framed by Amitav Ghosh, but further into the horizons of collapse, plotted and predicted in the context of peak oil. Petroleum pasts, however, are a much different, far longer thing to comprehend, beyond the scale of human time and into millennia, the space of geologic deep time as drilling becomes an equivocation with a journey back through time. We see this penetrative act, an act of wounding, mining as event, an occasion in which earth bones meet human bones to stage a pulverization of bioterrestrial histories. Within this, the operative logic of the mine is the deletion of ancestry itself. The alignment of the drill and the syringe is an apt one given the link emphasized by Oksana Timofeeva between oil and blood. She writes, quoting from Reza Negarestani, both oil and blood contain porphyrin, an organic compound that serves as evidence of a common lineage, the hydrocarbon, and in the eyes of the advocates of the myth of fossil fuels, porphyrin proves that oil as the blood of Earth is not just a metaphor, but a scientific truth. And indeed, perhaps this is why we experience such visceral reactions to the spill. But we will come to the spill shortly. For a moment, we must remain with the holy space of the borehole. Holy space is elucidated as an accompaniment to the smooth and stratified spaces as outlined by Deleuze and Guattari. It is metamorphological, always becoming either volumetric or surface-like and linear. As Rashot describes, the personae of holy space include artisans, miners, and metallurgists who transfuse mountains and turn the earth into Swiss cheese. They are itinerants who move at an ambulatory pace, following a flow of matter. The space within which they move is composed of passages forged through smooth nomadic space and striated sedentary space, without stopping at either one. Brian Massumi explicates this holy space as holes in habit. What cracks in the existing order appear to be from a molar or a striated perspective. The site of a breach in the world as we know it. The derelict space is a zone of indeterminacy that bodies in becoming may make their own. Masumi's holy space, or what he names derelict spaces, are autonomous zones that punctuate dominant political milieus. What are the effects of climate change but punctuations in the dominant political milieus? In the case of catastrophic weather events, they are often that which punctuates the political infrastructure itself. The holy space is a portal. Within our poltergeist frame, we see Carol Ann's closet as a manifestation of this. It is through this that Carol Ann disappears into the spirit world. Spirits emerge, and eventually Diane enters to rescue Carol Ann. Within our petroglyphs frame, we see it as the entry wound by which the metal proboscis of the drill penetrates the earth, both sucking at the subterranean and providing it with a means of escape.
Perhaps what is visible in the breaches of the world as we know it is actually the world as it is. Our visceral reactions to oil spills are in part because of the totalizing horror of the devastation wrought by these incidences, but also because it demonstrates to us the unruliness of the natural world, the sense that we're playing with forces far beyond our control, and that when it breaks free, be it from the earth or the drill pipe or into the atmosphere as CO2, we have no way of controlling it. It demonstrates a life that is outside of what we know. its consequences, when read in our context, read only of death. Or maybe instead it's not necessarily death, but something other than life. Oil is itself abject. The reanimated carbon of dead life and its unsettling discharge into space through mechanic extraction is at odds with our notion of life. There's something primeval and uncanny about it, the viscosity in the way it oozes, almost with purpose. We think here of Diane and Carol Ann, ejected from the spirit realm. They emerge covered in a layer of ectoplasm, but not glowing green. It looks more like afterbirth. Clasped together, Diane and Carol Ann look to have been reborn, ensconced in abject and otherworldly slime. We think here of the images of birds and sea life caked in oil, struggling to move along the Louisiana shoreline. As Emma Whiting tells us, Chris Daver, through Powers of Horror, a text which entered the world the same year as Spielberg's Poltergeist, positions abjection as a horrific blurring of boundaries, primarily between subject and object, that should remain always beyond our knowledge, but which, in a controlled encounter, may constitute a restorative, boundary-reaffirming experience. Consider the penetrative symbolism of the drill, the instrument piercing the strata of the world, performing an act of geologic wounding. The drill reaches into the earth for oil extraction forced by the human hand. Within this industrial context, these extractive processes reassert the positioning of the human as the primary agential force on earth. In this relationship, oil, as a resource for extraction, is framed as object. When the oil escapes, however, as is the case in Norilsk or Keystone or even with Deepwater Horizon, it becomes subject, no longer a simple resource. It becomes instead an impossible problem, a growing impossibility of life across the ocean or down the river, a thick and sticky shoreline invasion.
The earth operates within our cultural and ecological imaginaries as a life-giving force. But here, when we begin to reckon with the cruel reality of the world indifferent to the human, the world beyond our control, we realize the weight of our significance, our ultimate powerlessness, the terra mater as terra mater. There are powers beyond our control. Even what seems to be the most basic of divisions, that between life and death, is rendered obsolete. As oil drifts between the strata, between temporalities, between objecthood and subjecthood, and between life and death. As Pavanelli tells us, carbon below the earth, the fossilized remains of a world before human, is reawakened through extraction, becoming reanimated as the petroleum within our plastics, that which runs our machines, that which floods and spills after incidents, is a zombified force moving about the world. At once the flesh falling away from the zombie, the skeleton army, the agential ghosts haunting a world embedded to and entwined with oil, a malicious spirit waiting within the strata. We see this in Poltergeist as the forces of the spirits make themselves manifest, throwing objects about in orbit, emphasizing the agentic nature of material, the oil contained within material things. The work of Chi Sui Lee provides us with the language of spectral spaces, which speak closely to the haunted home of the Freeling family, but also the spectrality of being without petroleum aid. According to Lee, a spectral space is an actual living space, a place, location, or landscape that is characterized by the features of the spectre. Considering spectres as culturally specific and differentiated suggests that spectral space can be perceived as a space of heterogeneous time, a space of fluidity, and a space of uncanniness. The world becomes spectral space, haunted by our Petrogeist. Petroleum, the haunted and haunting, the present absence, the invisibility of it in plastics as invisible exhaust, as economic force, but an all-pervasive one, circling the earth, embedded in most things, processes, systems, but only rendered manifest when we see it materialize as it escapes from our grasp and wreaks havoc. In the final scenes of Poltergeist, as the horrors of the housing estate built atop the burial ground come to light, we are reunited with the film's real estate mogul Louis Teague, the man whose financial motivations led to this catastrophe. We see here a similarity between agents of capital, the figure of progress, building, and expansion, and the oil executive. Teague stands outside of the haunted house in Poltergeist, but faces no consequence from the actions of the spirits as the Freeling family escapes. This is the untouchability of the oil executive, facing the ghost, but not haunted by it, not harmed. We mobilize this here as we consider the future extractive industry. As we look towards deep-sea mining, the sulfide deposits near hydrothermal vents, the ferromanganese crusts of underwater ridges and plateaus, and the polymetric nodes containing the elements that are to become computer components and such, which will power us further into the future. In our horrific framing, we have attempted to demonstrate the necessity of considering our future ghosts, and as such, we read the pleading in Diane's eyes as she implores Steve to hurry up and find the key so that she can escape, alongside the doleful eyes of the seal, caked in oily residue, as a pleading with us to consider the abject horror of reanimations out of our control.